Howdy, folks. Today we're going to find out how to create amazing headshots that sell, no matter whether you think of adding headshots as a side hustle or if you're planning to start a headshot photography business from scratch. Right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Lutz, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not subscribed to this channel. And you can really help us out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help us get more amazing guests on the show. Just one click, it'll just take 1 second. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, all the way from the Magic City, Tulsa, Oklahoma, the headshot photographer, photography speaker, and all-round one of the nicest people in the headshot game. Give it up for Pam Stukenborg. Pam, how are you?
Well, good morning, Kirsten, or good afternoon your time. How are you?
I'm very good. It's evening here, but of course, you're in Central Time. So what time is it where you are now?
It's a little after 11.
Fantastic. We just had a chat before, and you've been telling me it's actually quite hot where you are in comparison to winter UK.
A wonderful 72 degrees is the high for today. We love it. The great thing about Oklahoma is the summers are really long and the winters are short. And every so often you get a little summer burst in the middle of the winter, and it's fantastic.
Did you tell me that whenever anybody moves to Oklahoma, it's usually just because somebody else got them there?
Oh, yes. Most people have followed a lady friend or followed a handsome man to Oklahoma, and I'm one of those people as well. Although my husband Bernie's not originally from Oklahoma, but after we got married, we moved here to be closer to my 5 stepchildren, so who are now all adults and living their own best lives. So Oklahoma is a great place to raise kids, and although we've been in the news for a few various things lately, but that's okay.
So Tulsa it's a fairly sized city, I guess, and so from a headshot photography point of view, it makes perfect sense, because I'm guessing the majority of your clients are either business people or actors.
It varies so much. Yes, actors, especially with the recent release of the Killers of the Flower Moon, that was filmed in Oklahoma. Tulsa King, that was filmed in Oklahoma. So quite the acting. If you want to get into acting, Oklahoma's a great place to do it. And in Oklahoma City, there's also it's called Prairie Surf Media. They bought the Cox Business Center and it turned it into a giant soundstage. And some of Kill the Flower Moon, some of that was filmed there, as well as Tulsa King, and a ton of other episodes of not episodes.
The reason I'm asking is because Tulsa as a city seems to be popping up more and more regularly. I mean, you mentioned Tulsa King, for instance, big fan of that show. But again, it was set in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So does that mean over the last few years, has there been sort of an increase in actors, and how has that had an effect on your headshot photography business?
Yes, it has had an increase in actors coming, or even people who are Oklahomans who have decided, I want to jump into this, especially, with, the various, people groups that are needed for the different productions that are happening. We're such a varied and diverse population that there's a lot of opportunities here for actors. The business aspect of it, Oklahoma, actually Tulsa, we have the Tulsa International Airport, and it got that term because back in the oil boom days, it was actually the largest and busiest airport in the world back in the oil boom days, which is a fun little fact that you learn once you live here for a while. But businesses, we have another thing called Tulsa Remote, which encourages people, entrepreneurs, to come in and start businesses here in Tulsa. There's an area of town where I have volunteered for the past 16 years, and where the building where I used to go starts, it's the John 3:16 mission, where I first started. that area was very sketchy. And they have just turned it and just rejuvenated the whole part of the city that used to just be buildings that would be great to photograph in, if you want to do kind of the urban outdoor rundown building thing. But now they've created a space for music and, I mean, the restaurants. You want some really great food, come to Oklahoma, as well as the music scene, the art scene. It's really a wonderful city to that you don't feel like you're in a massive city like Boston and New York. It is very, it's walkable and but a lot of things going on.
It's definitely one of
Not to mention,
it's definitely on my bucket list, Tulsa, for sure. Especially since the Tulsa King. Yeah, fascinating show.
Right.
So we're talking about headshots today. I live on the outskirts of London. London obviously is a massive metropolitan area, but I really live on the very outskirts. I mean, the outskirts of the outskirts, I would say. And so really, I would say where I am, it's more of a small town environment. Although we're connected to London, of course, and it's not far. It's like 45 minutes, But the vast majority of my corporate clientele are really not from central London. They're really from, the surrounding area. But what that goes to show is that headshots, no matter where you live, even if you live in a small town or, if you live in a suburban area, headshots are really a viable thing, even just as a side hustle.
They are. And, and I think the pandemic and people seeing themselves on Zoom calls where they didn't have a nice headshot to be filling in that would be a great space if they didn't have a nice photo, or the photo they had they weren't happy with, or it had been taken, 2, 3, 5, years ago. And we're like, oh no, I need to update my headshot. And I have a home studio. I call it my studio suite. And I let people know they are coming to my residence when they are having their headshot taken, because I don't want them to have the perception that they're coming to a strip mall and then turn into a neighborhood and be like, whoa, who is this person? Where am I going? So during my consult conversation with people, my clients, I let them know this information, that they are coming to a studio in a residence. And they've appreciated that from the feedback they give me. But you can do it, here, as well as, it's reasonable to rent. I have friends that have studios, like a co-op studio where you can be a photographer and be a member of it and go shoot there with, various, not just a headshot setup, but also if you're doing portraiture, boudoir, any other type of photography, it's a great space. So there's a few of those around here in Tulsa and Oklahoma City as well.
And that's an important point, because I think, often photographers may be thinking, well, I can't do headshots because I need a studio and I don't have a studio and stuff like that. And, as you prove, you can actually set up a studio setup in your own residence, in your house. I mean, actually, my situation is no different. I shoot everything in my house. It's just where I'm sitting now. I'm basically sitting in the middle. Give you the wide shot. Literally behind me is my editing station, and on one side, that's my shooting space, and on the other side, it's actually just my living room. So it's literally built into the house. The advantage is that when clients come over to my house, it's a really comfortable environment. It's not a sterile studio environment. It's actually really quite comfortable, because it is my home. My dog's a bit crazy. But,
your dog's adorable.
Oh, but he's nuts. He's absolutely crazy. He's in his own. He's got a little house in the hallway that he likes to create type of a thing that he likes to hang out in. So he's in there. But so again, it really makes headshots a viable option for somebody who just thinks like, oh, maybe I just add that to my portfolio and I just add that to the things that I do, because actually I can do that in my house. That being said, of course, I know a lot of people who would hire a studio to do headshots. My thought with that is always, that's really only viable if I did like a headshot day, where I'd shoot X amount of people.
Sure.
Otherwise,
Sure.
it's just financially wouldn't be viable
Mhm.
to do that.
Yeah. And I always encourage my clients, even when I have corporate clients, to come to the studio here and have their headshot taken here. While I will go on location, I charge quite a bit to go on location because I'm breaking down what you see behind me. I'm breaking this whole studio down, my elastomeric background behind me, everything is coming with me. So I'm to the point where it's like, I need somebody to load up the car and help set things up. And so to do all that, um, it's a tremendous amount of effort. So if they really want it, then sure, I'll do it. However, it's going to cost them some money to get me out there. But here's what I found with having the corporate clients come to me is, for one, whoever normally is like HR contacting me about they want to have headshots taken, and I take from out of their hands a lot of the legwork, where give me their contact information. I will email them, reach out to them, arrange a phone call with the person I'm doing the headshot for, and go through the whole, this is the best practices, and are you doing your own hair and makeup? If you aren't, well, I happen to have a salon and a makeup artist I work with, and then I find out what my client's schedule is and connect with my makeup artist and my stylist and coordinate all those appointments for them. So it kind of like whoever the HR person at the corporate doesn't have to worry about that. The client doesn't have to worry about that. And then it's, if anything's happening, I'm like the liaison for these 4 different areas. And so it's a great way to add another level of service to my clients. And then when they come here, of course, it is, I agree with you, Kirsten. It's so, you can really make it just very hospitable, and we have control over the temperature. We have control over the music. There's so many other things that if someone is having a kind of a little rough go of it, getting into kind of the space where they look confident and approachable, sometimes if they need an adult beverage, I used to be a bartender, I can hook them up.
Yeah, I think that's needed. That's often needed. It's one of these things. When clients first come in, especially if they're new and they've never been here before, or maybe they haven't had any really experience in having their headshots taken or something. I need to kind of chill them out a little bit. I've talked about this many times on this podcast. What I do is I usually, we just sit down, we have a chat over a coffee or something, and again, just this being my actual house and a living room. There you go. It's it's a lot more comfortable, and it, people ease into it, and that's quite an important, I think it's quite an important part of it, as opposed to, shooting in a, in an office environment. And of course, just like yourself, when I go to a company and I shoot headshots in their offices, it's a thing of like having to break everything down, logging all the gear over there, setting up, and depending on what it is, it's just too much to do for one person. So I very often have an assistant then, and then of course that adds to the bill because you're then having to pay another person and so on and so forth. So then it becomes a much bigger thing than it really needs to be.
Right.
Although, from a practicality point of view, of course, for a lot of companies, especially if they have a number of employees that need headshots, it's actually easier because they don't have to send people to me. I just go there and take care of everything, and that's it.
Right. It is. But I have found that for me personally in my business, if I am going to do an on-location shoot, I schedule everybody on the half an hour. I don't do the short, 5-10 minute headshot. Well, I can, I've done it before, but at this stage in my business, really helping people to kind of just ease into and not be so freaked out by the fact that there's a camera in front of them. And plus, you're fussing with their hair, you're making sure their collar's all the way it needs to be. And you're kind of like helping, chip off those edges of any previous photo trauma that they've experienced, which is a very real thing that people not want to come because, it's been terrible. Like the work has said, there's some banks here that hire me and they're like, well, I'm sending you these people, and they send me the first 5 great, no problem. They come in here actually to the studio. And then once we did those 5, they're like, great. And the HR was like, now I'm going to send you the rest. And which were the ones in our mind are like, this ain't going to be easy, honey. And, when people say, oh, I hate having my picture taken, I love hearing those words because I know what we're going to do together here in the studio is going to be, it's life-changing. And they're going to feel more confident. And when I'm first taking the pictures, I'm just dialing in my lighting. Just stand there, just look at the camera. You don't have to do anything. Just look at the camera. And I get some amazingly terrible pictures of them. It's truly mugshot material. Yeah. But what's great is because shooting tethered to my laptop, then I get them. Now I start dialing them in and working on the position is their best position, then working on expression, they're just conversation we're having. So I say, it's break time. Come on around. Let's take a look at these together. And I start where it's the mugshot. And then as you go, of course, the images are going to get better because you're starting to work with them and pose them in a way that looks natural. And then you start working on expression. And so they see progress right away within the first few minutes of getting them in front of the camera. And that is such a confidence, boost for them, as well as the lights look amazing. So they're like, wow, the lighting, oh my gosh. It's like, oh yes. and then it's like, all right, now that we see, this side or that side, I'm going to turn you this way or that way and get back behind the camera. We're going to take some more. Then we take some more. And then we do this process until we get, a shot that's like, ooh, that's close. That should be your moneymaker right there. You have more outfits. All right. Get in there, change into your outfit, which I have a private bathroom attached to my studio here, which is super convenient and works out great. Because I tell my people, my ladies, bring your makeup. If you use a particular styling tool, bring that with you. While I have, the typical brushes, combs, hairspray, if there's a particular product that they use, well, bring it. And I can't tell you how many times I've actually styled my client's hair for them. They're like, my hair's not doing what I want it to do. I'm like, yes, that's typical picture day behavior. And it's like, come on in here. I got some skills. I'll help you out with that. So there's so many things as a headshot photographer that we can do here in the studio that when we're on location, while, we can have some items there, it's not always as conducive to as when you're, or convenient as when you're here in the studio.
And from what you've just been saying, it just becomes clear that if you want to be successful at doing headshots, you really have to be a people person.
It helps.
Really, yeah, it's really all about making somebody feel comfortable. Because as you say, people come through the door and the first thing they'll say is, "Oh, I hate having my picture taken," and you're going to have to get through that or get past that, and make somebody feel comfortable. And for me, it's always this, my game or my goal, I should say, is to create that transformation from I hate having a picture taken when they come in to them thinking I had a really great time. I really enjoyed that when they leave. And if you can, if you can make that happen, if you can transform somebody's attitude, then the shoot was successful. In my view, I can get great pictures. I know that because we've been doing it long enough. That's not, it's not necessarily difficult. The technical aspect of it is not really that hard, but we'll talk about that in a second as well. But I think for me, the real trick, the real talent is when you can make somebody feel really comfortable and, because that's when you really get to the good stuff. The first few images are, the way I sort of approach it, I always think, well, the first, 20 shots are burners. I'm not even going to look at them later on. I'm just going to use that time to make somebody feel comfortable with the process. So they get used to the lights flashing and me,
Yes.
holding a massive.
I tell them, Yes. I'm like, you're going to get used to my verbiage. All this is just you getting used to my verbiage, how I'm directing you. When I'm sticking my finger out and I'm having your nose follow my finger, when I'm telling you to press your face towards my hand, this is all. And as well as what the great thing about shooting tethered too is they think they're sticking their head out. But when they're smiling, they're going, then they're looking, it's like, oh no, don't do that.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. I have these pre-prepared speeches that I use every time with a client, like every single time. There's my teachings about how the human head moves upon 3 axes, and then I link that to hand gestures, and then, but they get it.
Yeah.
And then it basically, it allows me to literally move them without having to physically move them. So that's one thing. And the other thing is the thing about the gooseneck, where you get them to stick their head out. And it's the important part about that, I always feel, is you got to teach them how to move, but then you're going to have to allow them to see the result pretty much straight away. And so what I tend to do is, I teach them how the posing thing works. We then do a little bit of shooting, and then within a few minutes, I get them in front of the screen, and we'll just scan through the images that we've just taken, just so they see and they understand what the effect of that was. And that takes a lot of the awkwardness away, because, the minute you tell somebody to do a turtleneck type of a thing, they're going, well, this is weird, But then when they see the effect on the screen, they understand what the purpose is, and then they're really quite relaxed in continuing to do it. That's the thing for me always. So being a people person is super important. Now, let's assume that somebody's thinking, whoever's listening to this episode might be thinking, well, I've been thinking about adding headshots to my portfolio, or I've tried it and it hasn't been very successful because I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it or whatever. So we're going to go back right to the beginning, and we're going to look at what somebody who's interested in doing headshots, what they really need to do and what they need to work on. So from your expertise, for anybody wanting to get into doing headshots, what's the first thing you think that they should look out for?
Well, the first thing, and now this is where I started. I saw Peter Hurley on a Google Plus, Scott Kelby's Google Plus platform, and it was like, who is this photographer who it's not like watching paint dry, listen to him talk about photography. And he seems kind of fun. Who is this person? What is he doing? And so he had a video out called "It's All About the Jawline," and I started watching that. I'm like, well, this is interesting, huh? And it makes sense. And Karen Minder in the video, he's hilarious. And what Peter did in that video really was like, wow, this is something that helps people so much. And at that point, I wasn't doing headshot photography at all. I didn't even have a studio in the house at all. And so I had overused and over a weekend hurt my elbow and could not pick up my camera. And Miles and I had talked, like, okay, you know what, you need to park that on a tripod and not lift your camera because you can't. And we had met Peter in February of that year, 2013, I think. Yeah, 2013. And it's an adorable story. If you don't mind, I'll tell you. I wanted to go to New York City for Valentine's Day one year, 2013. And my husband, Bernie, at the time traveled for a living. And I was like, baby, can I kind of tag along on your travels and go to DC with you where you're working? And then can you take the day off and we'll go to New York and have Valentine's Day in New York, have dinner, comedy club, something like that. And he was like, let me look at my travel. Let me see if I can make that work out. Well, he did. So on the train ride from DC to New York, I had emailed Peter Hurley's info at peterhurley.com and said, hi, my husband Bernie and I are visiting from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I saw your video. It's all about the jawline, and I'd love to just meet you and shake your hand, and that's all. I hit send. I don't tell Bernie until after I hit send. And I was like, this is what I just did. And he says, baby, he's a very busy person. He's not going to be able to meet with us. I was like, well, I figured typical last born here, the least he could say is no. That's always if I'm thinking, should I ask the question? That's always my first go-to. And I got an email back about, an hour later or so from his assistant saying, on Thursday, the 14th at is either 10 or 10:30, Peter can meet you at his studio. He would really like to do so. And I was like, yes, I'm so glad I asked that question. This is fantastic. So we meet Peter. He spends like 45 minutes with us talking about kind of like where I am in my photography. And this is in the studio when he had his Hasselblad there. His Keto Flows hadn't even come up with a FlexGate or anything yet, or switched over to Canon. And so it was like really the early days back when it was Hurley Pro, PH2. Peter Hurley Pro 2 or something. That was before it became the Headshot Crew. And so that was February. And then it was that May when I hurt my elbow so bad I couldn't even pick up an 8-ounce glass of orange juice from this weekend shoot that I did. And so Bernie's like, I think you should just dial in on this whole headshot thing. Park that camera. We'll turn the game room here in our house into a studio, and you just go for it. And that was 10 years ago, and I've made a really nice business of it. And before I'd even become part of the H2 Pro, I would I would have my clients, when they got here to the studio for their headshot, I would sit there and we would watch It's All About the Jawline together. Oh, wow. And I swear I've probably seen that about at least a couple dozen times, at least, over the years. And it's been so helpful. And then, of course, he came out with the squidge, and that was another helpful way that I would, have my clients. And now, of course, being into as long as I have been, I don't need to do that with my clients. I've honed those skills on that whole squinching and jawline and all that. I'm pretty versed at that now. So, but it's been really great though, really. And I've niched down. I only do headshots. I do work with some authors, actors, of course, who need more than just headshots. I will do that. But primarily, I would say between 85 and 90% of my business is headshots.
Yes, it's a really interesting thing to get into, because I got into headshots after I moved to the place where I'm living now, in the hamlet of Rickmansworth. I don't actually know whether it's a hamlet or not. It sounds good. It's a little. But like I said earlier, we're right at the outskirts of London, and at the time, my main clientele were international corporates, and so what I would do is I would shoot conferences, and so I'd go all over the place to shoot this conference here and another conference there, and and so I didn't really need to pay any attention to my surrounding. It really didn't matter where I lived, because I'd have a client and they would have a conference in Budapest, Hungary. Well, that's where I'd be for the next 4 days, and then I'd go somewhere else. So it really didn't matter where I lived. And just before, I would say maybe a year or two before the pandemic, I thought, actually, first of all, I'm a portrait photographer, so I love portraiture, but I actually really like contemporary headshots because to me, it's like a contemporary form of portraiture. So I've always really liked them. And of course, I've come across Peter's work, and I really like the look of that. And like yourself, I came across some videos online, and I kind of thought, oh yeah, this is actually something I could do. And then the other thing is, of course, where I live here, I'm surrounded by movie studios. So there's Pinewood Studios, which is a huge Hollywood movie studio, which is not even 20 minutes, 10 minutes away from me. There's Leavesden, which is a huge Warner Brothers studio where they make things like all the Harry Potter movies and lots of other Hollywood movies. And there's another two. Apple is building a studio around here. It's the British equivalent of Hollywood, I guess. And so
Nice.
I thought, like, well, there's got to be lots of actors around here, because it's just that corner of the of the UK where that's happening. And so I was just getting into it, and then of course the pandemic happened, and all of the conference work that I've been doing literally went away from one day to the next because the whole conference sector just shut down, internationally.
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought, okay, well, I'm really going to have to actually think about what I'm going to do in the future because, just putting your entire business on this one leg is dangerous because you don't know. I mean, never in a million years would I have thought that there'd be something like global pandemic that could wipe out my business. I mean, if anybody told me that before, I'd be like, yeah, you watch too many sci-fi movies, man.
You're right.
Yeah, but it happened, and who knows what's going to happen next. And so I figured, like, okay, I better come up with a way that I can create different, like, columns, different support columns to my business so that if one thing goes down the drain for whatever reason, I still have other things that I can potentially fall back on,
Right.
And that's originally why I thought, well, actually headshots might be a really good idea. So it started as a side hustle type of a thing, and then it just grew and grew. So Peter's videos were really, really helpful with that, and of course his book as well. There's and I can't remember the title now. Is it The Headshot? I think.
Yes.
And then I
have it.
it's a really great book. And then there's also there's another photographer I came across named Gary Hughes, who Gary focuses more on corporate headshots, and he very much focuses on volume headshots. So where you shoot 20, 30, 40, 100. I kind of thought, well, that applies to me totally because that's usually what happens at a conference, for example, very often, where a company has the whole team there. And so, when I put the two together, I kind of figured, okay, well, this has legs, quite literally. This is something that can actually work. And it really worked. It worked really well for my business. There's a sort of as a support sort of thing. And you mentioned the headshot crew. Tell me a little bit about that and what that entails and what that actually is for those of our viewers in business.
Sure. Yeah, sure. With the Headshot Crew, it is you sign up for it. You go to headshotcrew.com, and it is a community unlike any other photography community that I've come across. It's one of the largest ones. I think we're up to, I want to say 20,000. I haven't looked lately, but all over the globe. So, which is great when you are shooting a conference. I've had people say, gosh, I wish that, I could, we're here for this conference. I wish my whole office could have this. Well, you can put in your zip code, and that's going to pull up who the other Headshot Crew photographers are in your area. And so it's really, I've gotten referrals from people who have found me through the Headshot Crew. When I was, I think the first conference headshot sessions that I did on my own by myself, not like assisting anybody. A company out of LA had seen headshots being taken at a conference. They're like, oh, great. We're a software company. We're coming to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We want to offer headshots in our booth because as a software company, they're like, what do we have really to offer? Nothing actually tangible. So they hired me to do headshots here in Tulsa, and they found me through headshotcrew.com, which was great. So I'll tell anybody at conferences, well, just go back and put in the zip code, and you'll find one. And so that was really a very interesting process, because with the conference photography part, like I didn't at that point deliver the image immediately to the person. Right. This is a little insider information if you're thinking about doing conferences, is I delivered the, soft edit directly back to my client, because in order for people to have their headshot taken, they had to fill out their information, contact information, employer, email, cell phone number. And so I provided that along with their headshot. And then my software customer was able to get a second touch point with the person who visited their booth. And I encourage them, come up with a hashtag, encourage them to use their hashtag when they post their headshot on LinkedIn. Ask them, hey, would you mind making a comment on when I was at the, this conference and visited the booth of this customer, this is what I got. So it's actually, and people are going to talk about their headshot. They like it. It's a great picture of them. So where did you get that? Well, I got that at so-and-so's booth when I was at their conference. And so it's been, to be able to do that for an employer, as opposed to, okay, you visited the booth, boom, here's your headshot. And it doesn't give the client who brought you in to do that another touch point to revisit with that customer. So that's something that I found my customers that bring me on for the on-location shoots, they really appreciate that.
And that's a really interesting point. We'll talk a little bit about the sort of marketing aspect of headshot photography in a minute. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're listening or watching, then stay tuned, because we're going to get into all of that a little bit later on. Before we're going to get into the actual how-to in a second, as in like, how do you actually shoot headshots? What do you need? How do you light it, and all that kind of stuff. But there's also going to be a little conversation about marketing specifically a little bit later. So stay tuned for that. But we're still at the beginning phase, so you get to learn how to actually do headshots and how the whole thing works. And again, there's a number of really great books about. Gary Hughes wrote a great book about headshots, fantastic. Peter Hurley's book is phenomenal. That gives you a really good basic idea of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Now, I say that because there's one caveat there. Sometimes your market may be slightly different from, let's say, the New York City market, for example. And I'll give you an example. So there is something called, so the Peter Hurley style headshot, over here we call it the New York City headshot.
That's appropriate.
It's appropriate, yeah, right. But there's also something called a London headshot, which is a different style. And so where that comes from, it comes from the fact that in the UK, especially in London, properties are quite a bit smaller than your average property in the United States, for example, or in Canada. And that's just because, a lot of these buildings are really old. They're several hundred years old, pre-Victorian times. They were just built differently. And so all the rooms are really small. And so, if you were to compare an average, in a London apartment, you'd find all the rooms really, really tiny. There's even the smallest bedroom is usually called a box room, because that's basically what it is. It's just a tiny box. It's unreal. Even for me, I grew up in the south of Germany. When I moved to London, that's the first thing I thought. I was like, man, everything's really tiny here. Like, what is this? But but it is how it is. And the other thing is, of course, property prices in London are astronomical, just like they would be, in New York City, for example. But property prices here are through the roof. So a lot of photographers, especially when they first start out, cannot afford to have a studio. And because a lot of people live in apartments, for example, they also don't have a backyard where they could maybe build a studio or something like that. So traditionally, people would do headshots outdoors. So they'd find an outdoors location and they would do headshots. And what I did was it sort of created a particular look, like an on-location look. And sometimes you have, like a city scene behind you, and sometimes it'd be more like, I don't know, under a bridge, walls. I don't know. But it's a very specific look. And what you find now is the interesting thing is it's like now a lot of the time photographers try to recreate that look in a studio. So a lot of the time when I look at headshot photographers and I look at their work, it's like they're setting up lights and stuff in the background to make it look like it's outside of us.
Yes.
Okay. But it's just so whatever your market is, you're gonna have to. You can do one of two things. I mean, either you can basically go with that and create something that goes along those lines, but maybe it's a little bit different, so that it's kind of unique. Or you can go in and basically say, well, I'm not doing that. I'm doing something that's completely different. And for instance, I mean, Ivan Weiss is a really good example.
Yes, Ivan. He's great.
Yeah, Ivan is phenomenal. Ivan. I've known Ivan for quite a long time. He's been on the podcast a number of times. So if anybody's watching or listening, check out those episodes. In fact, during the pandemic, Nick and I did a selfie competition with him, where it was in the middle of the pandemic. It was lockdown and everything, and we thought like, oh man, we got to do something. What about we call up Ivan and we say like, well, let's do a selfie competition. So we basically take selfies and then we compare them, we talk about them and stuff like that. That was super, super interesting. So that's a fun episode. I'll put the link if I remember. But so Ivan has a style that's very unique and very personal. And of course, he lives literally in the center of London. So that's a really good example for somebody who injects his own personality to do something that's completely different from what just about anybody else around us. And he does it very, very successfully. So that's a consideration when you're thinking about getting into headshots. Am I going to go with the mass market, or am I going to try and do something that's more unique? Both of these options come with their own difficulties and problems, but it's a decision that you've got to make, I think, in the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you from firsthand experience that investing in the membership of being part of the headshot crew, which is very reasonable, it is the best money I have ever spent on photography, because I mean, I'm self-taught with the exception of taking a few classes here and there, and at community college or other local camera stores. And so becoming part of the headshot crew, what I've learned through that, I mean, they teach you everything. I mean, Peter actually teaches you everything. And because you think he's only one person, he can only do so many headshots in a day, and he wanted other people to be able to get good headshots too. And so he's like, I'm going to create this community in this space where I can teach people how to do great headshots. And so there's two levels. When you first become a member, you're a protege, and then you work your way up to becoming an associate level, which I'm at the associate level. And that's where there's like 15 images that Peter himself has reviewed, or one of his top mentor people. Mostly Peter's the one who does the reviewing. And every image has to, like, you gotta hit every single mark. And that it's a grueling process. And I didn't get it on the first time. I had 5 reviews, maybe. I only cried once during one of the reviews. I was just very upset. And when you set your expectation a little too high, then it's like, shoot, he's right, And that's the thing, is he is very much a champion for, or a cheerleader for you. He wants you to succeed. And when going through the review process, knowing that, okay, you know what? No, I need to train my eye better on color. My lighting, wasn't right. And so, going through the headshot crew, it helps you to kind of really hone the skills. And there's videos on there that you have access to about the whole, getting people to, for expression, working with people, lighting, editing, the whole thing. And as well as, I've made some amazing friendships through the crew. I was going to a Formula One race in Austin, Texas. And after I was in the headshot crew for a couple of years. And I was like, I'm going to put in Austin, Texas, and find a photographer under headshotcareer.com and see who shows up. Well, this name popped up, Susan Colbert, and I was like, oh wow, she seems cool. So I messaged her through Headshot Career, like, I'm coming to Texas for the Formula One race. Hey, you're in Austin. Are you anywhere close? And could we do lunch? And so we got together for lunch, and she's a delightful person. And then one of my friends, I didn't realize, relocated to Austin, and she's like, Pam, I see on your social media that you're in Austin. Did you bring your camera? I need a headshot. Will you do a headshot? And I was like, I'm here for the race. I'm not here for to do headshots. And so when I was talking to Suzanne, Suzanne's like, I have a studio in my house. She's like, I would love to see you shoot. Come on over and bring them over. So my friend and her daughter came over, and we did headshots for them in Suzanne's studio while I was down there for the Formula One race. And it was just it was an absolute blast. And there's one of my other dearest friends who became my mentor, Shay Swinford. She's in Kansas City. And, she has been just an absolutely wonderful, friend and mentor, and really helped me get to the point where, like, all right, I'm ready to do another review with Peter and see if I can get to this associate level point. And one of the benefits of getting to that associate level is there's a mind shift. You look at yourself differently once you've achieved that point. But there's a balance, though, because you don't want your identity to be based on whether or not I am a headshot photographer or whether or not I'm associate level. It's like headshots is a sliver of my life. It's just a part of who Pam Stukenborg is, and I just I love doing it. and so I encourage people that if you go check this out, go this route, to know that this is something that's a tool to help you grow, something that you could turn into a full-time business of all you do, or it could be a side hustle, or it could be a part of your photography business. But it's a great way, with the things that you learn through the Headshot Crew. Anybody who has a face, these techniques work. If you can make your bride look more beautiful because you know how to tell her to hold her head or stick her head out like a chicken, or besides posing her body, the husband, if you can let them know, if you laugh during, what you're having a great time, absolutely, but make sure you hold that pose and get that jar out there so that we capture, the most beautiful and attractive picture of you. Seniors, high school seniors. I mean, seniors as in elderly seniors. These things that you learn through headshot photography, they are applicable to anybody who has a face in any photography genre.
Exactly. That's exactly what I've found. It's been so useful, just generally for portraiture, regardless as to whether you end up, creating commercial headshots or you just creating portraits in general.
Right.
But it's definitely it's such a useful skill. And the thing that I've heard time and time again, from yourself and previous guests who've also been part of the Headshot Crew, is that it's such a great source for learning. Because I've learned, over time, that communicating and hanging out with other photographers is an extremely powerful way to get better yourself. And I know this, like, from my past life as a musician, for example. I know that when I was a kid, for example, my dad one time said to me, because, it's the thing when I turned about maybe 13 or 14, I ended up playing with people who were much older than myself because I could play the guitar fairly well. And then there were like guys, my dad's age or whatever. They've been doing it for decades. When I started playing with those guys. And I remember my dad saying to me, like, look, you always want to surround yourself with people who are better than yourself, because what that does is it pushes you on and it makes you get better faster. If you're the best player in your band, you don't really, you don't know where to go, basically. And so just like that was true in music, and it absolutely was, because that's completely my experience. It's really, playing in a band where everybody is like, multiple steps ahead of you, you have to pull your socks up, as we say. You gotta go after.
Pull your socks up.
Yeah,
if you wear socks.
If you wear socks. in the UK, you better wear socks because it's freaking freezing most of the time.
True.
But it's one of these things. So you better get on with it because otherwise you're not going to be able to keep up. And that's the thing. It's a great tool. And I found this in photography actually. I really found that to be true also. Whether you're whether you have a chance to join something like the Headshot Crew, or over here in the UK we have the Society, and I can't remember exactly what it's called, the Society for Portrait Photographers or something like that. I'll find out what it is exactly, and I'll put in the description. But again, it's a great it's a great opportunity to join a group of people who are doing the same thing, and guaranteed you're going to find people who've got a lot of experience in this particular field, and you can benefit from that. And even if you just get into photography, joining a camera club or a photography club is a really great move. I found that when I moved to this area, and I really had never been a member of a photography club ever before, but when I moved to this area here and I got married, I didn't know anybody else around here. My wife said to me, "I think you should join a camera club because then you can hang out with other nerds like you." And I'm like, okay,
we're not nerds.
I remember thinking like, I don't know if is that an insult or is that something to it? And I was thinking about it. I'm thinking, no, you know what? There might just be something to that because, what I found is I joined a local camera club, in the town of Watford, if anybody wants to know, which is by next town here. And I've met a lot of people, bearing in mind that the average age in a typical camera club is quite high. So, there are a lot of people in there who would have been involved in photography for decades and decades and decades. There are people in there who've been shooting for 50 years or so. But what that does is, in that room is so many years and decades of experience that regardless of what you want to learn or what you're interested in, there's going to be somebody in that room who knows exactly what you want to know. And it's a phenomenal opportunity to actually tap into that knowledge and learn and get better. And I freely admit that I am not the world's greatest landscape photographer. I'm really not. I suck at landscape. And
the expressions, you just cannot get an expression out of landscape.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, product photography. These damn products never laugh at my jokes. It's terrible.
Right, exactly. They just sit there. They don't do anything.
Exactly. But, things like, branches of photography that I really never had anything to do with, like macro photography is another good example, that sort of thing. There's got to be somebody in that room that knows everything there is to know about macro photography. Film photography is another thing, Although I'm absolutely old enough to have experienced film photography, and I did because my dad was doing it at the time.
Yeah.
I
started there.
Yeah, I personally I don't have any experience with film photography yet. I'm absolutely fascinated by it, and I know that if there's anything I want to know about film photography, I know a whole bunch of people in my local camera club who would have done that literally since. I was going to say since the 1800s, but probably that's not fair.
Yeah, let's go back pretty far. Yeah.
But
I'd say the 1900s, early 1900s.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it's a really good thing to basically put yourself in a situation where you surround yourself with people who know all the stuff that you need to know in order to succeed at that particular thing. Headshot photography being one example, and finding an organization like the Headshot Crew, things like that can only be beneficial. Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about gear for a minute. Let's change gear.
Sure.
Let's talk about gear, because that's the thing. So let's say we've decided headshot photography is something that we want to do. We're not entirely sure how we do it, but now we need to know. Okay, well, what kind of gear would I need to get started in headshot photography? Do you really need a full studio setup, or can you get started with maybe a much smaller setup?
Oh, sure. You can start with speed lights. You can start with the window light. That's where it all began way back when with Peter. But I find that I have the two 1x3 softboxes and one 1x2 softbox to the bottom, and so we've got that kind of like that wonky triangle type setup for the lighting, but you can do that with speed lights and soft boxes as well. I find that I like having, the softbox really, the softbox helps disperse the light as opposed to like 3 speed lights that are just hitting your person real hard. Having that that is helpful. Do you need a bottom light? No. Have I used a reflector before? Back when I only had 2 lights, absolutely. I had a reflector that was right on the bottom that I would use for a little extra bounce there. And because I encourage anybody to don't go into debt to do this. Use the equipment that you've got. You can figure it out and then earn some money with your headshots and then go buy gear. Although I know that Bedford Camera Video has a 0-year finance. So if you do I want that camera, I need that lighting, you can get there are some good deals out there. But I encourage you, use what you have. But if you can get to a point where, my camera's on a tripod so that my camera heights are pretty consistent. And with the exception of if somebody's tall, I had a guy 6'10" in here. I took my Lassolite softbox, or not soft, highlighter background, and I put posing boxes underneath it to raise my background up higher so I could accommodate the top of this guy's noggin. It was crazy, but it totally worked. I have the Manfrotto columns so you have the trigger that you're able to just slide the two lights. Actually, I'll slide back here. You can just slide them up and down. It makes it super, super convenient here. And then I have my third light below. I have my tether table, so I put my laptop over there. And then I've got my camera or a tripod behind me. And right now I'm shooting with the R6. And it's probably time to update that camera. I've had it for a few years, though, when it shortly came out after. And I went with the R6 instead of the R5 because in the studio, I didn't feel like I needed all of those pixels, and it suited my needs. So now, can you do this with a camera that isn't a mirrorless camera? Yeah. I started out doing headshots on a Canon 10D, and then I went up to the Canon 7D. That was before they came out with the 7D Mark II. And I'm like, can you get a little more creative with your names of the cameras?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I shot headshots I shot everything with a Nikon D750 for 10 years. Roughly,
Okay.
9 or 10 years. I shot lots of stuff with that thing. I shot billboard campaigns with that thing. And
Nice.
the amount of times people tell you, you need at least 50 megapixels to shoot a billboard. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. To be honest with you, I mean, I've been shooting 24 megapixel sensors for at least, maybe the last 12 years or something. I've never had any issues with that whatsoever.
And don't you think that it really is, it's that genuine expression that you get from your clients. And when you capture that moment and when they see it, they're like, oh, or when they tell you, I showed this to my daughter and my daughter's like, Jack, that's the best picture I've ever seen of you. It's like, that is such a compliment. I love hearing that. Or when people say, that looks just like you. And it's like, yes, that's what we're going for. And especially nowadays, we aren't meeting people face to face. We're looking at, our phone. We're seeing a little small, caption of a person on a phone. We're not there in person. And that thumbnail is so small. And that's why you got to nail the expression and be able to feel like you genuinely connect with that person, because otherwise, if it's a deer in the headlights or if it's a freaked out picture, people are going to see that. And it even boils down to a question as what's their job? What's your job title? And if the person's job title is an accountant or, in finance, or if the person's a real estate agent, or if the person's a counselor or a banker, it's like the banker, they better look trustworthy in their headshot. Because if they don't, if they look like they're a shark, that is not going to fly. However, if somebody's a real estate agent, they need to look like they're someone who you would not be afraid to go and be alone in a house with, That's super important. They've got to look very, very approachable and honest. And, as well as, well, so does the accountant too. But anyway, when people are having a moment where they look like they're having a genuine expression, that comes across.
Yeah. And nobody's ever asked like, oh, what camera do you shoot that on? Like that was the gear issue there is, it's almost like a non-issue. But also, I think for maybe the first 4 years of running my headshot business, I used to use speedlights for the whole thing for two reasons. I started using speedlights because I just had them, I had them lying around. And so I think I bought one extra speedlight, which was like a relatively inexpensive Yongnuo speedlight. So that I had three. I think I had two originally. And then at one point, oh, it might make sense to have a third light. So I bought another relatively inexpensive Yongnuo speedlight. And then I used these three speedlights I call them the three amigos is what I used to call them. And I used it for at least 4 or 5 years to shoot all sorts of different headshot sessions, individual sessions, volume shoots. I did tons of volume shoots with that. I used to shoot like 40, 50 people on one lot of batteries, and actually then all you got to do is flip out the batteries, change them over and you're good to go again. I've never had a bulb go, I've never had a flashlight go, none of that. So it's worked really, really well. There are some downsides to it, and actually battery life is actually a downside because there will be a point where the batteries start to kind of, go a little bit slow, and then the what do you call it? The reset time of the flash is just, it takes longer.
You can miss that moment.
Yeah, the recycle time, it takes longer, and then they might start to misfire, or one of the three might misfire because it recycles longer than the others because the batteries get worn out and everything. So that is a real issue. And of course, for me, there was a point where I was like, okay, well, I'm pretty much done with that. I need to invest into some different, studio jobs. But you can really only do that. And this is the business side of it, of course. You can really only do that once your business really allows you to put that money back into the business. At the very beginning, when you're just starting out, that's most likely not the case. So I'd always say I'd be very wary of dropping a lot of money into buying new gear when really you don't need it. Like, for instance, you were talking about strip boxes earlier, soft boxes earlier. You can start out. You don't even need a reflector. You can start out with a white poster board. If that's what you've got. Absolutely, 100%. People have been using that stuff for centuries. The same with backdrops. Do you need a hand painted canvas backdrop? No, you absolutely do not need a hand painted canvas backdrop. All you need is a roll of paper, and off you go. And that's like, $30 or whatever it is. So really, or actually I have a friend, I'll tell you what she does, brilliant. She goes to like a place called Hobbycraft, which is like, arts and craft, like an arts and crafts store, basically.
Yeah, it's the Hobby Lobby here in the States.
Yeah. And so she buys colored cardboard, and she uses that. I mean, it's just about the right size for a headshot, and then if there's a bit missing, she'll just Photoshop it in, no problem. But, that way, these things are like, what's that in US money, for like 50 cents, maybe 75 cents per sheet, something like that. So you can go in there, buy all the colors for under a tenner, and that's it. Yeah. And so you can do these things. You don't really need a lot of gear.
Yeah. This is a background hack, or like a V-flat hack. If you go to a sign store and they have 4x8 sheets of signage that are solid colors, and there's black, there's white, there's yellow, there's orange, there's pink, there's red, and like I have them for a while there, I was like bringing in a V-flat on either side of the headshot. And yeah, you go through, it's funny, with that, you kind of go through phases where you do different things. So it's the white background, and then now I'm like totally the gray background. I love the gray background. I need to update my website and get my gray background people on there. But this 4x8 sheet, what you can do is have the sign company score it on the back, and it will fold and stand on its own. And because it's plastic, it's very portable. It's very usable standing on its own. It's not like the cardboard ones. So, and I think it's like $15 a sheet.
Yeah, these things are fantastic.
Sorry, I got to go.
That's all right. So my secret background and reflector hacks are always poster board. White poster board and black poster board. I got tons of that stuff. In fact, there's a whole stack over there, all different sizes that I've cut them to. I use black poster board to cover a skylight that I have in the roof that I need to cover up when it's sunny and stuff like that. That stuff is beautiful. In fact, I use tons of black poster board as flags when I create videos for Platypod. For those of you who are new to this podcast, head over to Platypod's YouTube channel, and you'll find some videos of me teaching certain photography techniques, mainly to do with how to shoot relatively small objects.
I need to get one of those.
Oh yeah, scale model cars and stuff. But as much as we think about lighting things, of course, we also always think about how to prevent light from getting somewhere, and that's what we use flags for. And black poster board is like the most beautiful thing ever invented for flags, because that stuff is phenomenal. And again, just from a purely talking headshots, from a practical point of view, so I shoot obviously in my house, as I mentioned earlier, but my space where I shoot is relatively small, and all the walls and the ceiling are painted white. Which can be advantageous because I don't actually need a reflector on the side, because I've got a white wall there, which does that job for me. Brilliant. But when I'm trying to go for the slightly more dramatic look and I want to create deeper shadows and stuff like that, I need to prevent that white wall from reflecting the light back in. So I use black poster board to create flags to basically deepen the shadows. And it's so simple. It virtually costs almost nothing, that stuff. And, and it's so flexible. And again, it just goes to show, do you have to pay tons of money for actual photographic flags? No, you really don't. Black poster board. That's the tip.
Right. I was shooting at a customer brings me out for their annual conference. And this room that we were in, it had the canned lights from the ceiling. And where I had to have my backdrop, there was a canned light bearing right down. I'm like, oh, I can't have this. This is not good. And so I took gaffer's tape and a round paper plate and took one of my light stands and rested it on it. And I raised it up and I stuck it right to the ceiling to cover up that light, so it wasn't bearing down on the clients' heads. And but then I was not quite tall enough to get it off, and I found a tall security person that came over and stood on a chair and that.
Yeah, gaffer's tape is another beautiful invention. I always say, the combination of poster board and gaffer's tape, it allows you all the flexibility you ever need. So to start out with, speed lights are a really great choice. Things like poster board as reflectors is a really good choice, although I do highly recommend at some point investing into maybe a 5-way reflector, because they actually do give you a lot of flexibility, and they're very portable and they pack away really small, and they don't break the bank either. That's the kind of stuff if I was starting out today, that is the kind of stuff I would spend money on. I wouldn't really go for, if you have a decent camera that does the trick, absolutely just use that. We'll talk a little bit about lenses in a second. But before we get that, just one final thing on lights. So once you're at the point where you're thinking, okay, well, it might be at the point where I invest into some studio lights. What would your recommendation be? What sort of studio lights are you using at the moment?
I use the Westcott FJ400s, and I love them. They are wireless. I have a love-hate relationship with wires. My dad's a master electrician. I have a brother, master electrician. Wires have been in my life all my life. And I try to keep them high and tight, out of the way. And when I got the FJ400s, it was just like game changer, really. I'd had a different set of lights. I think it was ProMaster. They don't even make them anymore. But when I upgraded to these, it really, the trigger system that they have that goes on your camera, you can adjust the lights from your camera. You don't have to go to it and hit all the buttons. It's really easy to update the software with these lights, and they're a great workhorse. And you can take them anywhere. It really is. I can't rave enough about them. I really, really am happy with them. And the back to the softboxes, that they're Westcott softboxes also. But this design, I mean, anybody out there who's ever tried to get those wires bent to get those softboxes built, they can cause you to lose your mind. And these here, it's like an umbrella. You pull back the white scrim, and then choom, there you go. It folds up and it goes into this neat little bag. It's very portable. So Westcott, they got a bead on this, and the lights are not crazy expensive. You can get a set of these lights, and for me personally, I'd rather go without than get something that's kind of like, well, this is kind of, it'll do. I'd rather save my money and then get what I really want to get and invest in that. And those lights, they're well worth it.
Westcott is absolutely, it's a fantastic brand to invest in because it doesn't actually break the bank at the bank. And as far as bang for the buck is concerned, they are phenomenal lights. In fact, I tried out the FJ400 on my recent trip to Norway because David Bergman brought one of them over with him. We did some shots with that FJ400. Beautiful light. It very much reminds me of the Godox lights that I use. Again, very similar, very, very similar brand. Same, it's the same kind of price point. These are lights that are, they're sturdy, they're reliable, and absolutely a great choice for if you're planning on getting into headshots, and taking that step, maybe that first step into studio lighting. There's absolutely no matter what other YouTubers might tell you, there's absolutely no need to drop a ton of money or even sell a child in order to afford pro photos or broncolors or something like that. No need for that at all. I've been shooting Godox for a little while now. I absolutely love those lights, and they're so super reliable. And maybe you heard it here first, but Godox are bringing out a brand new trigger for their lights, which is touch screen, and it's really, really fancy. Nice. It's coming out in a few weeks, I've been told.
Nice.
5 weeks from now. You'll definitely see a thorough review of that trigger here on the Camera Shake YouTube channel.
That's great.
But yeah, so that's where I would that's what I would aim at. There are a number of other brands available, but as far as your experience concerned and my experience concerned, Westcott, Godox, these are really great brands to go for. You also got to think if you're doing headshots as a side hustle, you want to actually make some money with that. Like if you spend all your money and more on like buying new gear, then that's not going anywhere. Right. Okay. So let's talk lenses.
Sure.
What do you shoot with normally?
I shoot with the 85mm prime. I'm a Canon shooter, as I said earlier, and the 85mm prime. So this was so interesting. I was shooting before with my Canon 5D Mark IV, and I had an 85mm lens, and I didn't know kind of what I had because when I went mirrorless with the R6, and I decided to invest in the 85mm. And that's the thing, with camera bodies, the technology is going to be changing. And new ones are coming out and whatnot. But with the lenses are where it's worth waiting and investing in what we all know as good glass. I've only been shooting digital for, I married my nephew's wedding photographer, and he was a Canon shooter. And that was 18 years ago. And the only changes I've seen with lenses since starting 18 years ago. The first one was image stabilization. And then the second one was when they were mirrorless, and then they came out with the new RF mirrorless lenses. That's not a whole big range of changing. There may be more. There might be some people that, well, this happened or that happened lenses. Well, that's fine. These are the two that I've noticed that have been the ones that have impacted my life. And so with the 85 millimeter, it's worth it, investing in that good glass. And so back to my surprise from the one I had with my 5D Mark IV, this 85 millimeter lens that showed up, the size of it is massive. I mean, here, I'll grab it. So, of course, I've got I have my lens on here, and lens hood. I like using a lens hood even in the studio because, if you drop it, which I don't because I keep it on my camera, but this thing is a beast. Oh, yeah. And the 85 millimeter Canon lens I had before, it's like this big. It's like a baby 85 millimeter. And I normally shot with the 70 to 200. And then when I was going to be switching over and I had ordered this 85 millimeter prime lens, I thought, you know what? I want to start getting used to shooting headshots with the 85 millimeter prime lens. So I was using my little baby one, and it worked very good. The pictures came out super. But that lens, it's gorgeous.
And it's like you said, there are different types of lenses, of course. I would say, personally, I love the 85 too. And what happens is, I would start out a headshot session on a 70 to 200 on the long end, anywhere between 120 to 200 and something like that. But what I've found is that the images that the client picks at the end are virtually 99 times out of 100 are going to be shot with the 85. And so what I've started to do is, if I have somebody who's really very nervous, I will start out with the 70 to 200 just because there's more distance between me and the subject. Mm-hmm. And, as we're getting to know each other, as we're starting to have a conversation, it's easier if I'm not right in their face, basically. So we'll shoot for a little bit. And then at some point, once I feel that they're relaxing a little bit, I'll switch over to the 85, which now means that, of course, because of the focal length, I'm now much closer to the client.
Right.
But at that point, the client is ready for that. He or she's not going to be freaked out about the fact that I'm right in front of him now. So it's sort of almost like a little psychological trick to make somebody feel more comfortable. But I know that they're most likely not going to pick any of the shots with the 70 to 200. And so I've got to really love the 85 as well. And what you mentioned about the baby 85. So typically, you would have an 85 1.8 and then maybe an 85 1.4. And if you're a mirrorless shooter, you might actually get to an 85 1.2. So I think the wider the aperture, the more expensive these lenses get. And so whilst, for instance, an 85 1.8 might set you back, I don't know, 300, 400 pounds, maybe something like that, the 1.4 might actually set you back $1,000 or something like that. But you can get amazing, more, and you can get amazing, exactly, well. But you can get amazing images with the 1.8. I've been shooting the 1.8 absolutely forever. And again, nobody's ever asked, what lens do you shoot that with? But the other thing is also, I never shoot at 1.8.
I don't either.
So it's a really, and you can say, like, well, but the bokeh is much better. I know that. I don't shoot bokeh. When I do the headshots, I've got a plain background. I'm not shooting bokeh.
Right.
All I need.
Right.
It's actually, it's fairly pointless. Again, it goes back to the thing about being business savvy. Is it worth investing that money into the business if the improvement is so marginal? Is that worth that little bit of enhancement in the product, in the final product? is that really worth that amount of investment? And to my mind, it's just, there's other factors that come into it, reliability and, how solid the lens is. And all that, I know that. There's a number of different things you get to consider. But especially when you're starting out, you can get a cheap 1.8, 85 mil, or, secondhand. We have a thing over here called MBP or MPP, can't remember. It's like a secondhand photo thing, great quality lenses at a fraction of the price. Totally worth it. That's exactly what I did in the beginning. I bought secondhand lenses. I still have them. Also, it's another trick. You mentioned newer generations of lenses. Of course, they're better. But a previous generation of lens will still do the trick because, guess what? 10, 15 years ago, people used to create amazing photography with those lenses. Yep. So, again, you can save a bundle by just, by maybe buying an older lens secondhand. To me, that's always been a great... in fact, my first set of studio lights were secondhand. They were absolutely terrible. I still have them somewhere. I haven't used them in like 10 years, but they were absolutely shocking.
Yes.
So, you couldn't even remote control, and you had to plug the cable into the camera. It was terrible. But yeah, so those are a few little tips that can help you out if you're just starting out and you don't have that particular lens. Then that can work.
Yeah. And if you are using the 70-200, setting the millimeter like around the 91, 92, point is what we had learned to do. And that kind of gives you a closer to the 85 millimeter look as well.
Yeah.
And you have to be so far away.
Yeah. And even, I use a 24-70 a lot for portraiture. And of course, again, for those of you listening or watching, I've mentioned many times before, I do a thing called 3 heads in a row. All of that is shot with a very, that's all shot around 24 to 30 mil. So it's a very wide focal length. It will distort at that point, but that is the whole point with these portraitures. I will them to distort because I want to bring out this sort of cartoonish kind of look, not something you want in a professional headshot, by the way. So
hey, Kirsten, I love your 3 heads in a row. It's so fun to look at your 3 heads in a row. I love your creativity and what you do with them. It's so fun. You the watcher, if you haven't seen 3 heads in a row, you've got to go check it out. It is fantastic.
Yeah, head over to Instagram at 3 heads in a row. Literally 3 as in THRE heads in a row. Yes. It's a fun little project, but I think it's a really good example actually when it comes to focal length, because the way that project is shot is really the opposite end of how you would shoot a professional headshot. With a professional headshot, you don't want any distortion. You want facial features to look natural, and you want the face to look proportional. In fact, you actually want to enhance those features if you can. With a slightly more cartoonish stroke arty project like 3 heads in a row, you actually have creative freedom to create anything you want. And of course, in this particular instance, I want the face to be distorted. I want it to look hyper real and cartoonish and funny and comical and
wacky
and wacky. Yeah, and the focal length plays a large role in that. It's of course it's the posing and everything else, but it's the focal length really takes it over the edge. I've seen people try to emulate that look with using different focal lengths, and it's never worked. So it's really a vital component in that. But yeah, so for headshots, 85 plus is where I would say, so if you have a 24 to 110 with, type of lens, that's a zoom lens, yeah, that'll work absolutely. If you're 85 plus, that's going to work. A 70-200 will work. 85 is beautiful. Even, I just recently got a macro 110. A 105 macro lens. Really nice lens. It's a macro lens, but it works extraordinarily well for portraits as well. So that's another one. So if you already have a 105 hanging around, just use that. Again, no need to necessarily invest into new glass right there. Cool. Okay. So that's our lens choices. So we talked a little bit about lights. We talked about camera gear and lenses and stuff. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. So if I'm new to the headshot game and I want to, and I've done all my practicing on all my neighbors and friends, and relatives,
Yes.
children. That's exactly what I did at the time.
Boundary exchanging. I will give you your headshot for your time to stand in front of my camera and do what I tell you to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's, again, we haven't stressed that before, but I must stress that. Like, you need to practice. You need to practice. And for that, you just need to get warm bodies in front of the camera.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Doesn't matter who it is. It might be the guy who wants to shop down the road, your sister, brother, dog, the person you shared a toaster with, during freshman or college or something, whatever. Anybody.
Yeah.
Drag them in from outside. Because that's all you need to do is practice. You don't need to practice your posing, your communication, all that kind of stuff. But once you've done that, and I mean, my daughter, which is 12 now, I've practiced on her since she was 5, I think. She's so used to being in front of the camera. She literally sit there with her phone nowadays, because every kid has to have a phone. She'll just sit there, she just look up, I take a photo, and then as I'm reviewing the shot, she's straight back on her phone, and she goes, straight back on her phone. She's so used to it. She's total pro. Total pro, that child.
That's great.
In fact, she's getting to the point now, she's getting to the age now where, what did she ask me the other day? She asked me, she said, like, oh, do you know that video that we made in the pandemic, where we did a little video where we're recycling, and it was like, as part of a video competition that we did the very early days of the podcast. She goes, "Oh, can you delete that, please?" I'm like, "Why don't you want to delete that?" And she goes, "Oh, because I don't want my friends to see it."
She's too cool now.
Yeah, she's too cool. Like, you were 6 at a time. I mean, you were cool then,
Yeah.
But
her friends would think it was adorable.
I know. The other day, she admitted to me. She goes like, "Oh, my best friend. She started watching the Camera Shake podcast because she's really into photography." I'm like, "Oh, right on. See, I must be clear."
I love the voice you're doing for your daughter. That is hilarious.
Well, that's not exactly her voice. But yeah, she's like, it's one of these things. It's just that age, when they sort of hit teenage, then that's when all of a sudden these things become.
It's true. And you know what? Speaking of that, with teenage and middle school kids, that's something where it's an awkward phase of their life. And I've had the opportunity to be a part of a program that I did a 2-week internship with middle school kids who are now like in their 20s. And even one of them, she and I still stay in touch. And photography, if you're if your middle-aged child has no use for mom or dad, but they take great pictures with their phones, encourage that photography part of them. That's a great way, well, you do that on your phone. I wonder what you could do with a professional camera. And I had a friend of mine, her son and cousin, I brought them on a photo walk that Bedford Camera and Video did. And the next time I saw her, she was like, "I have to tell you, when I picked up my son from that photo walk," she's like, "normally I pick him up from school or from some event and he doesn't really, yeah, mom, it was fine. Oh, how'd it go? Oh, great. One word answers." She was like, "He had such a good time. He talked so much about what he did, and he was talking a blue streak to me about this photography experience." And she was like, "Thank you so much." And so it's that has always stuck in my mind that is a great avenue if you're trying to connect with your middle schooler and they have a little bit of an edge towards photography. Help them scratch that itch, and it's a great way to connect with your child.
Exactly. And even, because nowadays everybody takes photos with a smartphone. It's a great way to get into photography. You don't really need to necessarily buy all the gear. You can get started with a smartphone. Absolutely no problem. Cool. So we talked about gear. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. So we've decided we want to get into headshot photography. We've got the gear necessary. Maybe we've got some some speed lights. Maybe we've invested into some better lights. We've got a camera, we've got the right lens. How do we get the message out?
Yes. You talk about it. You talk about it with everybody and anybody who's going to listen. I personally, I don't pay for external advertising. What I do is after I've had a headshot session and given the person a great experience, when I have the discussion with them, this is how I'm going to deliver your digital files to you. And it's going to be a link, I use SmugMug link, where it'll have your images in that link. And I tell them, I describe this is what it's going to look like. I name the files with the square crop for web use. That's the one that'll fit into any Circle social media, profile picture, and then the high resolution versions. And then I let them know below that link, I'm also going to send you a link for a Google review. If you wouldn't mind filling that out for me, because I would say 75% of my customers find me, maybe 60, yeah, I'm guessing. They say, I just said there, like all statistics are like made up on the spot, so I'm making it up. But for the most part, I do keep track. I could look at my data sheet. But the Google review is so helpful. That's how people find me. And the other day, somebody sent me a text of when they Googled headshot photography, this is what came up. There were 3 that came up, and I was number 2 on the list. Number 1 had 12 Google reviews. I have 64 Google reviews, five-star reviews. The other 12 5-star reviews. The other one below it, it was less than 20, if I remember correctly. So when people look at that, you may be the second one in the ranking, but when they see those 5-star Google reviews and the number of those, and then they start reading what people have said, that makes a difference. You just got to ask for it. And not everybody does. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to mention it to them during the shoot, right? When, they've had a great time. They've just paid the bill. And they're like, this has been amazing. And would you mind doing this? Oh, of course I would. So when you include that in the link with their gallery, there's a good percentage chance that they're going to go ahead and fill that out for you. So
absolutely. Exactly. And you can always ask again, a little bit later if they haven't, if you realize what they haven't actually, left a review, you can always email them again a couple of weeks later and say, hey, by the way, be amazing if you do that for me. You come up with incentives.
You give them a discount if they do it.
So yeah, you could do. I mean, if you're finding it hard to get people to, to give you Google review, you could incentivize it. You could basically say, okay, so next time, if you leave me a Google review, then next time maybe get 10% off or 15% off or whatever it may be. That's another strategy that you can employ if you wanted to build up Google reviews. But the important part is asking for it, because I don't know how many times I've spoken to people and they said like, yeah, but Google reviews don't really work because nobody ever released a Google review. They kind of go like, well, do you ask them? Because what I've found is when I started asking people, especially when they were happy, with the product, then they, a lot of the time they will. And, especially once you've got a few positive Google reviews on there and people see them, they're actually much more inclined to then also go ahead and, and leave another review, which is really useful. Do you use social media to get clients in the first place? Or how do clients find you? Like, what do you do?
A lot's Google. Some is through Thumbtack. I used to use Thumbtack a lot more, and then they changed up the whole process of it. And now recently I've just started getting a few inquiries through Thumbtack. As well as, Dusty Cash. He's one of the immigrants on 1883, the spinoff from Yellowstone. He found me through Instagram. And so it's, talking about it, I have a, Stukenborg photo is where you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And it's more so when you give people a really good experience, they talk about it. And my, when I have the authorization that I fill out, I give my clients 100% rights to the images, but I also have 100% rights to the images. And I get their address and I let them know, here's why I'm asking for your address. In the event that someone sees your headshot and you're like, do you tell them about the experience that you've had? Well, I like to send you a handwritten personal note thanking you. And sometimes I will, if somebody's referring a family member or a close friend of theirs, I'll let them know, in my thank you note, I usually include like a $15 gift card to, these days it's Quick Trip, which is the local gas station that you can also get really 100% meat hot dogs that are fantastic. Just had one yesterday. Or $50 worth of gas. While it doesn't go as far as it used to, it still helps. But I'll let them know, hey, when I send you a thank you note, would you rather have me send you this small gift card as a token of my appreciation? Or if you would like to, your loved one that you're referring to me, they're booking with me, would you like me to give them a $25 discount on their headshot session? Which would you like? And I mean, it's really, they appreciate the gesture, and then they get to, most of them in turn and in kind will say, oh, give that person, give so-and-so that discount. Yeah, that's really helpful. So it's a great way for them to kind of share in the experience that they just had and be kind to someone else.
And this, you've actually raised an interesting point there, because you're talking about basically marketing after the fact that a lot of people, including myself, for a long time, I've completely forgotten to do that. Your existing client base is actually the most powerful force in generating new business for you. It's, I know in the beginning when you first start out, you're going to have to, first of all, build that client base up.
Sure.
But what you do afterwards is vitally important, because normally when we think of marketing, a lot of people, when they think of marketing, they think about the kind of front end of it. They think like, okay, what do I have to do? Do I have to put like Facebook ads up, or do I have to, use social media and stuff? And all of that could be true, depending on where you live and how you do things. You could rely on, organic marketing. So you basically talk about it on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and whatnot, whatever you use, or LinkedIn, obviously for corporate. Just LinkedIn is the thing.
Which I need to do more with.
Same. I've stayed away from LinkedIn for the longest time. I mean, out of stupidity, and secondly because I just loathe the platform. Like, you couldn't come up with a more boring platform than LinkedIn. I mean, it's so boring. But
creative did not come up with LinkedIn. It definitely a business person.
Yeah, 100%. But if your main clientele is the corporate world, then it makes perfect sense, because you want to advertise your wares wherever those people hang out, and that's where they hang out. So right. And most likely not necessarily on Instagram, unless you're advertising to actors, for instance. Then, although I've also found that LinkedIn has been quite useful for actors as well, but and agents and all the rest of it. But so there's the front end of your marketing, and then of course there's the actual shoot, and then there's there's a back-end marketing where you can, for instance, think of an incentive, like giving somebody money off or a particular voucher or something, or just simply adding your former clients to a newsletter and keeping them informed every so often. I'm not saying you got to send out a newsletter every week.
Sure.
But, every so often, it just keeps you top of mind. So marketing is known as top of mind strategy, so that the next time they think about a photographer, your name pops up first. So whether they're thinking about photographer themselves, or whether they're recommending somebody to somebody else, or just by sending out a newsletter every so often, could be once a month. I know people who do several times a week. Jerry.
Oh,
I guess
I love Jerry. Yes.
5 times a week.
Right.
But and Joel, by the way, just saying that.
Yes.
That's the other one. But and Vanessa, that's what I get all the time. But here's the thing. So but if you're so if you once in a while you put a newsletter together, maybe once a month or something, then it just keeps your mind, and also you can inform your former clients of special things that you've got going. The thing that I've got going at the moment is I'm planning 2 days of headshot mini sessions, which I normally never do. I do them specifically on 2 days in the year, and that is it. So there's only 2 days every year where I run mini sessions, That's a special thing,
Yeah.
which is meant for people who are just after one quick headshot. So it's a much shorter session, and it's very different from what I would normally do. But,
Yeah.
but it only happens once a year. And so I inform all of my former clients of that. Some are returning clients then, and they'll come back because they might want to update their headshots. Maybe they need a new one. Maybe they just need an additional one for LinkedIn, whatever it may be. And so, and it keeps them informed. And that really drives some extra business my way. So that's what I found. Come up with, look after your existing clients, keep them informed, keep in touch. Right. And that will also lead to more recommendations.
True. And I think too, when you talk about it, having it kind of almost, honing how you describe yourself. Now, like, oh, well, what do you do? And then we've all been in, what do you do? And then it's like, blah, 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 you kind of like, you can tune it out like Charlie Brown's parents. And, but here's what I've learned from Sally Hogshead with How That Fascinates. When you're in the room with the best of the best, how do you stand out? And what you do is what's different. When you do something that's slightly different, that can help you stand out in the best of the best. And we know there are so many photographers. How do you stand out, And if you're a person who's not an introvert or not an extrovert, but you're an introvert, well, we know that we can learn to do things. We're teachable. So I may need to learn to be a bit more extroverted and talk more about, my headshot photography. I know one of the hurdles can be maybe because you're starting out doing headshots, you don't feel very confident talking about it. Well, that's where, like you said, Kirsten, getting people in front of your camera, practicing with them. And I tell you, I'm a complete goofball with my clients. And even if it's a CEO who's all very buttoned up, you can definitely get them, to crack up and just get them to kind of stop controlling their face. Because that's what happens. They get in front of a camera and they think like, I need to make my smile look good. And you get this. It's like, that doesn't look good, people. No, don't do that. Whatever you do with your face, you need to stop doing that. And really having conversation with your clients and kind of getting, just getting more comfortable with, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Is it evoking genuine expression from your client? If you as the photographer are having fun with what you're doing, it's going to rub off on your clients. So if you're, what's your shtick? How are you talking about your photography? You're kind of like, I do headshots. It's like, okay, you don't seem that excited about it.
Yeah. It's absolutely right. Like doing things differently is really important. A good example is actually, this just happened to me only last week or the week before. I went to a networking meeting, like a local networking meeting where lots of small business owners come together and talk about their business, and introduce themselves to the local business landscape. And so this is a new meeting that I joined, and there were already 2 other photographers in this meeting. And it was interesting. So, immediately I thought, like, okay, I'm going to have to do something different. Everybody gets like a minute or 2 to introduce themselves. And so I thought, like, okay, so I was listening to the other 2 photographers. And of course, they're doing the standard things like, hi, my name is so-and-so, and I shoot this, and I shoot that, and I shoot the other thing. And I thought, okay, well, I can do the same thing. And I could say, hi, my name is Kirsten, and I shoot this and that and the other, which is probably be kind of the same thing that these people shoot, right? And then I thought, well, I'm going to do it the other way around. I want to tell people what I don't shoot. So, I literally went and said, like, hi, my name is Kirsten Loves Photography. Let me tell you what I don't shoot. I don't shoot weddings. I don't shoot flowers. I don't shoot pets. What I do shoot, is da-da-da. And so immediately had people's attention. And so the interesting thing about it was, I remember having conversations afterwards where people came up to me and said, like, oh, this is really interesting. That was a nice twist, telling us what you don't do as opposed to leading with what you do. Now, what I actually do may not necessarily be that different from what the other branding photographer does, but people will remember my presentation more because I did something different from what the others did. And that's key. And, again, just mentioning networking meetings can be absolutely worth their weight in gold.
Yes.
Especially if you're servicing the business sector, but it's a long-term investment. So it's like one of these things. It's a marathon, not a sprint, as I say. If you go to a networking meeting, maybe a local chamber of commerce or something, and you expect to get business from that straight away, that's a pretty hard sell. Usually, you need to build up relationships over time, and eventually, months, maybe even years down the line, all of that will pay back. But it's again, in the beginning, it's a useful thing to do.
Yeah.
It's been another pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. I think we've addressed a number of questions when it comes to starting a new career in headshot photography, or just adding that to your portfolio if you want to do it as a side hustle.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, sure. And if anyone, if they wants to talk, DM me on Instagram. I'll reply to you. If anyone wants to talk about my journey or any questions about what we've talked about here, go ahead. Instagram's a great place to get a hold of me. Just DM me, and happy to help in any way that I can.
Absolutely. And all the links will be in the description of this podcast, no matter whether you're listening to the audio version or whether you're watching it on YouTube. You'll find all the links in the description. Okay, folks, that's it for today. It was awesome having Pam on the show. I've certainly learned a ton of things that will help me up my headshot game in the future. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 55 from the early days of the Camera Shake podcast with Peter Hurley, where we deep dive even more into the art of the headshot. I'm sure you will absolutely love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube with plenty of examples of our guest photography in full Technicolor? All you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, then drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.